Not even know that they have influenced you. Maybe they do know they've influenced you. They've inspired you. They've informed you. And I'm just going to say, for me, I'm thinking of Sayuri, who doesn't say a lot, but I know that for me, she's an important part of my thinking, my approach to life, my worldview. So whoever it is, I'm going to ask if you would consider them, and then quietly in your space right now, say a prayer for mercy for that person. And now, glorious one, I turn my heart to you on behalf of all of us and seek your mercy. Because with mercy comes healing and restoration, renewal and remaking, new vision. Amen. We light Advent candles in the dark and dare to say another world is coming. Another government is coming. Another city is coming. To say that is also to say Babylon will not last. Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Come out of her, my people. These words from Revelation sound harsh for a season that people associate with carols and manger scenes. But from the beginning, Advent has always held together two things: the coming of a vulnerable baby in Bethlehem and the promised coming of the Christ in glory to judge, to heal, and to make all things new. Advent is apocalyptic on purpose. It trains our eyes to see the world as it is and our hearts to wait for what it could be. Advent is when the church learns to say two things: Babylon is falling, Christ is coming. John of Patmos was thinking of Rome when he wrote about Babylon, the Roman Empire that marched through streets, crushed communities, fused religion and power, and turned conquest into profit. John writes from the underside of history, giving language to trauma, rage, and stubborn hope. And if we listen carefully, we recognize his sociolocation. Babylon is the world where empires sell death and call it security, strip land and call it development, hoard wealth and call it blessing. Today's Babylon runs on extraction and exhaustion from colonized lands, extraction and exhaustion, from Black and indigenous bodies, from workers whose names no one bothers to learn, much less pronounce, from families in Gaza and the West Bank, from disabled bodies written off as too expensive, from queer and trans youth told that their existence is a threat. Babylon has sanctuaries, it has pulpits, it has flag draped altars, it hands out scriptures cut to size to endorse its wars, its police budgets, its border walls, its deterrence. It teaches people to say God is on our side while bombs fall and children starve. That is the maddening wine John talks about. A story so intoxicating that decent people can watch cruelty on their screens and still say, well, it's complicated. Many of us grew up drinking that wine. Some of us preached it. Some of us defended it until something in us broke. For some, maybe it broke late, but it broke. For some, the spell broke with images. Philando Castile being shot live on Facebook by a police officer. Ahmaud Arbery, Sandra Bland, George Floyd. Afghans clinging to an airplane as the empire retreats. A Palestinian father holding his dead child in the rubble. For some, it actually broke in church, a sermon that praised law and order and never said police violence. A prayer for peace in the Middle East that never said occupation. A theology of God's chosen used to bless apartheid. The moment you realize the God you love has been drafted into someone else's war plan, someone else's profit margin, someone else's border policy, that is a kind of apocalypse, not monsters rising from the sea, but the veil being pulled back. You start to see Babylon for what it is, and you cannot unsee it. Advent is for that moment. Advent is for people who have seen too much to pretend. Into that reality, the voice of God speaks. Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins. Come out is not escapism. It's not a spiritual Airbnb, pack your soul and fly away into private piety while the world burns. It is a summons to withdraw our consent, our money, our silence, our theology from the machinery of empire. It is an invitation to defect right in the middle of Advent. To come out of Babylon says, we refuse to call empire's violence God's will, no matter whose flag is waving. We refuse to let our faith be weaponized against the people, the poor, in battles, Somalis, or whatever de jure target Christian Western supremacy has chosen. We refuse the lie that your only choices are to fall in line or fall apart. When we say, come out of her, my people, we are joining a living chorus of resistance that already has its own liturgy. Like Free Palestine, like queer and trans lives are holy, like solo el pueblo salva al pueblo, like nothing about us without us, like Black Lives Matter. These are not political slogans tacked onto the gospel. They are the gospel. They are the cries of communities Babylon has targeted, dismissed, or erased. If Advent means anything, it means this. The God that we are waiting for is already standing there, already listening there, already becoming flesh and living there. So, to come out of Babylon is to say, if my government targets the vulnerable, I will stand with the vulnerable. If my denomination blesses bombs more than babies, I will not lend it my amen. If my family celebrates the separation of immigrant families, then immigrants' families will be my family. If the economy thrives by grinding down disabled bodies or low-wage workers, I will not call that blessing. That kind of coming out will cost something. But exile from Babylon is the beginning of belonging in the community of God, the realm of God. So John writes, her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered. Hear that. God has remembered her crimes. You see, Babylon specializes in amnesia. Babylon forgets the middle passage, but remembers constitutional originalism. Babylon forgets broken treaties, but remembers property values. Babylon trains us to forget, to move on, to change the channel. But Advent is God's refusal to forget. God remembers those whose lands were stolen, whose children were taken, those whose unpaid labor built Christian nations, those in Israeli prisons whose crimes don't exist, those whose Medicaid is stolen. Babylon forgets. God says, well, I notice your tears. I recall your corpses. I remember your names. I know your ancestors. The one who remembers is on the way. The one whose birth we celebrate is a threat to Herod, to Caesar, to every Babylon that sleeps well on someone else's suffering. So, when Babylon's markets shake, when alliances crack, when empires that seemed invincible start to tremble, do not be shocked at the chaos. It is God saying no to a world built on other people's pain. And it's God saying yes as a light shining from a manger. There are powerful people right now, hear this, billionaires, tech visionaries, political theorists, talking about Antichrist, talking about apocalypse, the end of the West. They're threatened by it. Peter Thiel is one of the loudest voices in that chorus. He gives private lectures. He's a dark figure in this presidential administration. He's the one who got behind J.D. Vance and elevated him. He gives private lectures about the Antichrist and public talks about civilizational decline, wrapping his own political and economic interests in end-time urgency. But his apocalypse is not John's apocalypse. In Peter Thiel's story, the great danger is not empire itself, but anything that might restrain empire. Global governance, democratic regulation, redistribution, climate action, decolonization. These things are a threat to empire. When ordinary people organize to put limits on AI, on weapons, on surveillance, on extraction, his rhetoric, Peter Thiel's rhetoric, casts our resistance as a path to tyranny. What an okey doke. As if public oversight were the Antichrist knocking at the door. For him, tools marginalized communities might use for protection become signs of the end. Institutions that might hold billionaires accountable become totalitarian threats. And the saviors of civilization become bold visionary strongmen and tech founders willing to do. They're the saviors. Tech founders willing to do what democracies allegedly cannot. But that's not Revelation. That is billionaire fan fiction of Revelation. John's Babylon is not too much democracy. Babylon in the book of Revelation is elite control built on the incarcerated, the deported, and gentrified bodies. John's apocalypse is not about protecting Western dominance or tech monopolies. You can't use the Bible for that and be true. John's apocalypse is about pulling the mask off empires, Roman, American, Israeli, corporate, digital, that live by sacrificing the many for the few. So as you hear, and we will hear apocalyptic talk from pulpits, from podcasts, from Palantir boardrooms. I'm asking you to test the spirits. Whose suffering is being centered? Whose power is being protected? Does this prophecy call the powerful to repent or reassure them that they are the heroes? If your apocalypse only scares you about losing your lifestyle or dominance, that's not revelation, because revelation scares empires. It comforts their victims. The question in Advent is not, will Babylon fall? Every empire falls. The question is, who will we be while it is still profitable to belong to Babylon? Advent people, that's you. Advent people live as if Babylon is already over and Christ's future is already breaking in. What does that look like? Practicing an economics of enough in a culture of hoarding. Practicing a politics of solidarity, showing up, speaking up, refusing to divide the oppressed into the worthy and the unworthy. Practicing a spirituality of truth, praying with eyes open, reading scripture with history in view, letting the oppressed interpret the text. Every Advent candle is a small act of treason against Babylon. We light hope and say, Babylon is not forever. We light peace and say, empire's peace will not have the last word. We light joy and dare to dance in a world that insists despair is realistic. We light love and insist that colonized people are our family. Some of you may be tired of people who are asking you, what the fuss? But hear this Advent word. God does not ask you to be the savior of the world. God asks you to stay woke. Jesus says, watch and pray. Stay awake to Babylon's lies. Pay attention to terms like remigration, which is another word for ethnic cleansing. Stay awake to the people's pain. Stay awake to the hypervigilance of brown mothers telling their children to stay close to La Casita. Stay awake to the flickers of another realm in the cracks of this one. And when you're tempted to ask yourself, what's the point? Remember, Advent does not end with Babylon's smoke. It moves toward a city with no more tears, where the gates are never shut, where the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. The future is not an excuse to disengage. It is the reason we refuse to give up. Because if Babylon can fall, then prisons can close. If Babylon can fall, then occupation can end. If Babylon can fall, then white supremacy can lose its altars. If Babylon can fall, then queer phobia can lose its pulpits. If Babylon can fall, then the empire within us, the shame, the fear, the domination can fall too. So this Advent, when you light a candle, hear the cry of revelation, fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. Come out of her, my people. Step out of Babylon with your body, with your budget and your boycott. Step out with love, lament, and a loud prophetic no, no way. And as you step out of Babylon, step into the quiet, stubborn, joyful work of building something new, a community that doesn't need empire to feel safe, a faith that doesn't need an enemy to feel strong, a hope that doesn't need denial to survive. So this Advent, standing in the dark, in the shadow of Babylon, holding a small, trembling light, and praying the most dangerous prayer the church knows. Come, Lord Jesus.
Pastor, you gave us a lot to think about. Pardon me. I don't know if, as we're kind of digesting what Pastor said and trying to apply it to our lives. I ask you in a minute to think of some of the phrases that pierced you or perhaps whispered encouragement to you. For me, one of the phrases was within empire and this system, it's built on other people's pain. Yeah, that's to me just one of the greatest tragedies of our existence in empire. I don't know, being probably the oldest person on this screen, I'm not sure if you'll understand this reference, but there's a cartoonist of way back when I was a kid, Walt Kelly, and he had a comic strip called Pogo. And one of his famous characterizations was when it was said, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." I don't know if anybody else remembers that, but it's just exactly what Pastor said today. So, in just a moment, I'd like you hopefully just popcorning and responding. But what are some of the ways Pastor identified all sorts of ways that we could react, that we could hear Creator's whisper of Advent or Creator's proclamation of Advent? What are the ways that Creator has spoken or is speaking to you now about our individual and collective roles in bringing Advent and every day standing in opposition to empire, the empire which is sustained and sustains our economy and our political system? Oh, Clint,
Clint's
hit it.
hand is up.
So this is just like, coincidences are God's way of staying anonymous. But like there's so many synchronicities in this conversation. I was literally just reading about Peter Thiel this morning, and because it's an overlapping topic of this really far right Christianity that is getting just completely intermingled with it. And it's like, how do we stand up for against empire? And then what do we do? Hey man, if you're losing any kind of hope, so like I did it I finally got to go protest, and I did this protesting, and this is what I'm telling you. I went to this place, I didn't get crazy. I went for 1 hour, and I stood there with a sign, and I said, hey, this is wrong. And you know what? If you need anything else to have any faith in humanity, go do that. Because I can tell you, in that hour, I only got 3 thumbs down, but I can't even count how many honks from horns, happy smiles, shaking the fist. And so guess what? We need to be able to see that in humanity. And I do believe that good energy, that coming out of the darkness, you know what I mean? That whole thing that's something that is just powerful for the whole. To experience that with your community, even though you don't know any of these people, you do know that they're on your side and they see it too, and that, hey, you know what? Hey, we're not alone. And I think when we realize that, I think we can flip empire.
Somebody help me. I'm looking for more hands here.
I've got a hand.
Go for it, Linnea.
Well, yeah. So encouraging for me, because I hear so much from evangelicalism about, well, let's, for example, the Gaza slaughter. Well, it's in the Bible. God prophesied that this was going to happen. So Jesus is coming pretty soon. And that's all they care about. I mean, like, there's no sense of responsibility for the lives that have been lost and are being lost. And, and I look at all this stuff and I think, boy, our country, and I'm seeing what, and feeling like it's over, but or quite as, I mean, it is sad, but boy, the immensity of the tyranny just really needs to come to an end. And I like some of Michael, you were talking about some of the phrases he used, you know, when Babylon falls, prisons will close. When Babylon falls, occupations can end. Colonization of our own bodies and cells.
I
All
think
this can come to an end. All these in train way. Those are just a few thoughts. Yeah, go ahead.
well, I just say our internet was freezing here, Lenny. I don't know if it did anybody else, but okay. Okay, any other hands?
Yeah. Did you hear anything? You had to be
Julia,
quick to write down some of those phrases. Julius has something.
yeah.
Yeah, I'll chime in. Thank you, Pastor Moore, for the message about the Advent. Um, Clint, thank you for that. Resistance with your sign and realizing what you already knew, but to your point, it reinvigorates you when you see most decent people on your side and realizing that we're not alone. And the system, Babylon, wants to confuse us and make us think that we're all in these silos and we're all alone. It's just us. But when we look at our common humanity, we realize that we are the global majority. And it's just a matter of standing together and resisting. I liked something Pastor Moore said, Dr. Moore said. You mentioned, and I just caught a little bit of it. You said you were mentioning the people in the prisons in Palestine whose crimes, and then you kind of paused a little bit because you're searching what was their crime? The crimes don't exist, and there are thousands of those people who are in languishing, who are hostages to empire. And I'm using that word hostage on purpose because the empire has been force feeding us that the only hostages are the people, the individuals that the empire deems worthy of being hostage or being deemed a hostage, meaning the Euro-American, no, the European descendant settlers in the settler colonial enterprise established by the Western powers in Palestine. And we have thousands of those hostages languishing in prisons, in dungeons, being tortured for crimes that do not exist. And then I thought, as Pastor Moore went on, their crime is their existence. Their crime is their existence because they are in the way demographically of the settler colonial enterprise, just as the crime of the indigenous peoples in the Western Hemisphere was their existence. And they had to be liquidated and pushed out of the way. And to your point, Linnea, how do you rationalize that evil? How do you rationalize that depravity? How do you wash your hands like Pontius Pilate of responsibility? Well, you blame God. Well, God said it had to happen this way. Talk about whitewashing. Latinos, remember when this great Christian, the great white hope, Donald Trump was on the campaign trail? Oh, we're only going after the criminals. No, it is the very existence of Latino people, of Mexican people, of indigenous people on this side of the border that is the problem. And to the extent anybody was foolish enough to believe, whether that person was a Latino, an African, a person of European descent, that this racial ideology is only focused on criminals, I hope you have been disabused of that naivety. Right. Somalians, they've been in the news recently. Nigerians, the empire has a lot of targets. But we remember, we've been through this before. Black South Africans, it was their existence that was the problem. The Black Africans in Rhodesia, what is now Zimbabwe, it was their existence that was the problem. So, Mr. Peter Thiel, thank you for mentioning him, Dr. Moore, creating a new rationalization closed in Christianity for the banal, depraved things that they have planned for us. But there's good news. Not only do we know that Babylon is going to fall, but Babylon has fallen.
Mhm.
It's too late.
Mhm.
You can't deport us all. You're not going to kill all the Palestinians. You're not going to kill all the Africans. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
And white supremacy in its death throes is thrashing about,
It's a death
searching
rattle.
for whom, searching for whom it might devour. But like Clint said, we're not alone. We're not alone. Thank you.
So, Julius, as you say that, something that's been on my mind quite a bit. We watched those videos. We listened to that music to start our time today. Honoring indigeneity, and yet we know that even though those songs were about resilience and survival and resurgence, we know that there's trauma there. We know that indigenous people have had to have tremendous resilience just to exist. And, I think of Dr. Joy DeGruy, who's written extensively about something called post-traumatic slave syndrome, the descendants of enslaved people on this continent. And, the psychology, the survival instincts that have been developed just to exist. As you pointed out, existence is the crime. And of course, not just on this continent, but on much of the globe. So the question, and I have to say, I am so pleased to be able to come to a church where I can preach and not have people mad at me, walking out on me, sending me letters of death threats, and no, I'm serious, because there was a time I was preaching, and for a whole 6 months, from January to June, there was a man who had a picket sign in front of the church where I was preaching, with the biggest picket sign I'd ever seen. All of his complaints about me, and he was basically coming from what his understanding of the Bible was. So, so I've had that's just one example. Rosie knows who I'm talking about, but that's just one example of, some of the resistance was passive aggressive. There were all kinds of things that, and the fact is that there were some people that just, they just didn't want to be there, but somehow, for some reason, they kept showing up. And so I'm delighted to be able to, I have to say that when I submitted my resignation in Oxnard at the church council meeting, one of the persons said, "Well, we are confident that you're going to go on and do great things." And I said, that's not really what's on my mind, though. Thank you for that. But I just want to be around people where we can be normal together, where we can be human. And so that's why, I mean, I take a lot of delight in this community. But back to what I was saying about trauma of indigenous people and descendants of slaves and colonized people. There's something that gets into our DNA, right? That influences our behaviors, that influences our lives. So the question I have is, what about white people? What about the DNA of white people? What about the psychology? What about the inheritance? I mean, that has to be dealt with too, just as the survivors have to deal with their trauma. You know, the descendants of survivors, the descendants of the conquerors, of the conquistadores, the descendants, they have to face up to something as well. So thank you for allowing me to say so much when I've already preached.
Who's next? I don't see any hands on the screen.
I just wanted to add what Pastor David said. Actually, there is a study on that. I forget what it was called, but it involved what they call perpetrators of the abuse of the violence. Instead of post-traumatic, I forget what it is, but there is a study in psychology looking at that for the whites, the Euro whites who have been involved, their ancestor has been involved in all this, and how that is also historically passed on to the next generation.
Oh, Julius, you get your hand up. Let's go.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on Pastor Moore's question. What about the people of European descent? Um, we can kind of see the defense mechanisms to facing up to the reality that you've just outlined, Dr. Moore. Meaning the people of European descent who are the beneficiaries of generations of land theft, labor theft, they know that they are sitting on unearned gains. But the frustrating but not surprising aspect of it is they have yet to fully, and fully may be an overstatement, they have yet to even begin to wrestle with the depths of what Dr. Moore has just highlighted. And rather than even begin to wrestle with the depths of it, let alone fully grasp it in its full dimensions, they actively deny it and actively attempt to turn the table around when the
Absolutely.
oppressed bring the issue to the table and claim actively and on up to their very great white hope in the White House right now, will feign like they are being discriminated against because
Right.
you bring these issues up, right? So we can see their guilty conscience by their very way of engaging with the oppressed on these issues. So that is a work that needs to happen within that community, the European descended community, to come out of this darkness, to come out of this depravity, to come out of this sense of self-righteousness.
Mm.
All we can do is do what our ancestors have always done: survive, thrive, and extend the hand of friendship, and hope that there's a hand of friendship, genuine friendship, that extends back. But that is a problem. That is a huge problem. It's a problem we've been wrestling with as long as we've been resisting. Now, fortunately, not all people of European descent are like that. We have great heroes who have stood shoulder to shoulder.
John Brown.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Right? But we have to be honest. They are the minority.
Right.
They are the minority. So those are my thoughts.
Linnea and Clint, can I just interject one thing quickly? And I think Linnea's hand and then Clint's. Julius, I think that was terrific. And I think the one issue that Linnea and I have discovered, which I hope we have to keep putting out there as white people, is reparations. That's what we've got to do, and we've got to keep fighting with it. And boy, even our own children are reactionary about it. It's just, but I think that's an issue that we need to coalesce around, because that's where the rubber meets the road for sure. Linnea and then Clint. Oh, you're muted. Muted.
Yeah, yes, I agree, and I've been thinking about it a lot.
Breaking up, Linnea.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's our
Freezing.
We
Maybe turn off your video, see if it improves.
Yeah.
should I stop then?
no, we can
Can
hear you
anybody
No,
hear
now.
me
we
now?
can hear you.
Turn
Okay,
off your
okay,
video.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. Stop me again if I start breaking up, but I just try to make it brief. Reparations is so big. It's the as Julius was saying, the magnitude of the denial is so huge. I mean, white people of European descent have very little inkling because of denial. And when we're helping facilitate Whiteness 101 with the Surge group, we learned about 20 different things that find the ethnicity.
It's happening
Yeah,
again.
we're not hearing you,
Uh,
Linnea.
and the culture.
Starting to break up again, Linnea.
We don't hear you.
Okay, I'll put.
Linnea, come on into this room. Mine's not breaking up, and then take this screen.
Mhm.
In the meantime, while they're doing that, I see.
I got just one little thing to throw in there. It's like when you were saying about white supremacy and its death throes. I've been saying that very statement. And so when you talk about the European, absolutely, it's a class thing. Because I'm only second generation. My grandmother came from England in the early 1900s. But she was lower class though. You know what I mean? And it's funny because we're all intermingled within my family, from Polish and everything else, and then Swiss Italian, and we got all these mixed, but we came from the working class end of that. And so because of that, we're more blended. And then we got to experience what the Native Americans did, because my grandfather's land was taken because his mother was Native American, and that land in her will wasn't written correctly. So lawyers fought it and took it. And it was oil land. And this was in the early 1900s. And so we, as white people, but mixed, understood what was really going on. So and that's, I think our ancestors are the ones who are at the protest. We're the ones that are trying our hardest. You know what? The hippies did it first, and we're trying to do it now.
But the other side to that, I'm sorry. But the other side
ahead.
to that is what Julius was talking about, as far as I, understood, is that I've always tripped out on the university classes, colleges, schools, everywhere, where all of a sudden it's like, oh, but that's not my fault. It's not my problem that, I didn't partake in, the thievery of the land and the racism. And it's like, shut the F up. Just by you saying what you're saying is doing what was done. It's like, talk about denial. Or the other one of like, teach me. Well, then teach me. Really? I've had to work my ass off to do all the research that I've had to do.
Right.
Like, get with the program. You want everything just handed to you still. So I had to just say that.
Okay,
And-
yeah.
and- go ahead,
I'm
Linnea.
not sure what parts came through before, but I was responding to Julius's, remarks about Europeans. And when we were with Surge showing up for racial justice, Michael and I participated in a seminar on what called Whiteness 101, because most white people just don't have an inkling of, the magnitude of their denial and the magnitude of the ongoing pain. Slavery's not over and that type of thing. So what we did in Whiteness 101 that I think was fairly successful was just start with the little things. What is a white person? What characteristics does this ethnic majority have? And there were maybe 15 or 20, and they were just little things like the way we obsess over time. We're one of the few cultures that do things like that. And it's dysfunctional because it's extreme. That's just one example. But white people seem to find understandings like that palatable. And maybe that's a good starting point before they could even stand to hear about things like reparations. They just don't know who they are. They think they're generic beings, and everybody else is other, right?
And they do not want to hear the term white privilege. That is one of the most denied. There is such a melanin link inherent in that. Boy. So yeah, I didn't mean to interject.
That's okay,
but yeah, the best thing that in terms of organizations that I've been in was before we were in Surge, I went to a Whiteness 101 workshop that they put on. And it was very, very powerful.
Mm.
It was, Clint, it was almost like a meeting, because
It's interactive, yeah.
it was interacting and it was an opportunity to be honest. Yeah, anyway.
So this is my final point.
Sure.
This is my final point because Clint raised an important issue about class. Okay. This ultimately is a class struggle.
Yes.
Okay. And the problem for the oppressed peoples around the world and in the United States who are disproportionately Black and brown and Asians is this. Whiteness is very comfortable talking about class because to whiteness, working class is fellow people of European descent. Okay. The problem is to make progress to make progress, we need our white working class, your people of European descent who are working class, to take the hand of friendship that brown and black people have been extending and join us in this class struggle. But the problem is, if you go to Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Florida, the white working class, I'm talking about poor people, they join up with the top 1% to the detriment of their fellow working class black and brown folk. So yes, it is a class issue, but the working class is being betrayed by their fellow working class people because of racial animosity. So you can't talk about class without inevitably talking about the artificial construct of race, which had to be created to enable the exploitation we're talking about.
Divide and conquer?
Yes, you needed to separate the white working class from the rest of the folks, the others, so that you can more better exploit the situation.
Yeah.
The depths of this are massive.
Thank you, Julius. I'm glad we have you, Julius.
Me too.
Because you can articulate from experience, and from being informed. I told you the first time I invited you when we were at that event at Santa Barbara City College, I said we need some blackness in our community more than we have already. And so I'm very satisfied with your presence. I think it's important to recognize. I received just 3 or 4 days ago. I received an email from my university, St. Stephen's University, from one of the department heads who had a question. One of our colleagues, one of my colleagues, another professor there, had a paper accepted to a publication. It hadn't been published yet, but the department head wanted to know because this person, because of what the person wrote about. The person is Canadian and white, and she is very much enchanted with Black liberation theology. So her paper had, referenced James Cone, really probed Black liberation theology. So the question that the dean was asking me is, and he also asked Lisa Sharon Harper, for those who remember her, should she identify herself as a non-Black person when she has her paper published? And my response was, I am a womanist and feminist. If I wrote about womanism and feminism, and I had a name, because David is easy. It's easy to see that that's a male name, but not all names are unambiguous. Some names you might not, a name like Sydney or whatever, you might not know. And I said I could not, in all good conscience, have a paper published about womanism or feminism without identifying myself as a man, because no matter what in this world, I can fight for women, I can fight for Black women, but I still bear the privilege of being a male. I mean, I can resist it, but it's still there. It's a reality. And so I say all of that to really, underscore the fact that that even if you are an anti-racist white person amongst us, which I celebrate, it's still important to recognize the blackness and the brownness and all of that as as being having a need to be platformed in all of our consciousness. Every time you speak, and I think that we do a good job of it, but that just needs to be highlighted. That well, I'll stop there. Just we can process that, and let's have Kenichi come on and conclude our time today.
Actually, I think it's somebody else today.
Who do we have?
Supposed to be Margie today.
It's Margie.
Yeah,
All right.
I thought so.
You're right. You're right. Absolutely. Well, this is perfect.
I just want to say, Clint, thank you so much for what you shared about that hour, because I feel like during the week, I know Bob and I both, whatever comes in the news, we just get so disheartened, so discouraged, so disgusted and upset and hopeless, and coming here, hearing from you, knowing that there are sane people, there are people who are compassionate, there are people who see what's happening is really helpful. I do want to identify myself. I don't know why. I just feel this need to, because of what you said, Pastor David and Julius. It's like my dad is white European heritage. My mom is Japanese, but my mom was born in occupied Korea from a wealthy class. So and my dad has Italian and German and English heritage. So I just feel like I have all the allies and Axis powers in my heritage. I come from colonial rulers. And it's funny though, because I grew up in Hawaii, where as a half Japanese person, the Japanese population in my city were the largest. And so I wasn't accepted into that population because I wasn't full Japanese. So I feel like I have come from this really interesting perspective where I just hurt for those who are excluded, because I see it from my aunt especially is very much a Japanese nationalist. She was much older during World War II, so she was really formed by that. So I just want to say that this is for me as an educator as well. I feel like those states that you mentioned, Julius, those are the states that are taking out the history of brown and black people from the history of the United States. And that is what everyone needs to learn and hear about. And I know that's what helped me see whiteness, just from seeing what's happened. And like what you said, Julius, that was something that was started in, have you guys been watching the American Revolution? By Ken Burns. That was from very, very beginning. They said, we've got to get, the poor white people to not hook up with brown and black people. So how can we do that? So it's an age old thing, right? That they've been doing. But I just want to say, I was really, I love the poem that you had, Pastor, in the very beginning when we joined. I took a screenshot of it where you were, I just felt like I needed to share that today with communion. Let me just go to that very quickly. That was the poem by Martha Postlethwaite. I don't know if that's how you say it. Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. And I just really like that because I just feel like, with the disgust and the discouragement that I feel all week long, I just need to have that clearing space. And so that's how I feel like I want us to approach communion this morning. So I just have a prayer that I printed out, and let me just pray that for us right now. God of justice and comfort, you see the brokenness that weighs on our hearts. You know the anger that rises in us when the world wounds the vulnerable and when the power crushes the powerless. Steady us, Lord. Let our anger remain holy and not corrosive. Let it be fuel and not fire that consumes us. Teach us what is ours to carry and give us courage to release what belongs only to you. when we grow tired, and I feel like a lot of us from our small group are tired right now, breathe your peace into our bones. When we feel hopeless, show us the quiet ways your kingdom is breaking in. And when we feel overwhelmed, remind us that justice is your work first, and we are simply joining you in it. So keep our hearts soft without letting them break. Keep our hope alive without denying the pain. And let us walk in love, truth, and steadiness all the days that you give us. So let's take our articles of communion just to connect with the hope that Jesus is coming. He has come, and there is going to be a bright future one day. So let's take that bread and remember that this bread reminds us that Jesus became fully human and struggled as we struggle. And take and eat, remembering that hope begins in very small places, in very small acts of trust. And then now let's take our cup, whatever cup we have. This cup reminds us that God's love overflows and overturns anything that claims too much power in our lives. Let's drink and remember that hope is rising, even in places we can't yet see. Amen. And